In the first part of our tutorial, we're just going to introduce the idea of a variable using the iOS platform instead of the Android platform. So this first part's just going to describe what a variable is and give some of the types of variables we'll be looking at in the following videos. So our tasks will be to declare and initialize a variable and eventually have it print out. In this part of the tutorial, I'm just going to introduce the concept of a variable. Now here I am in Xamarin Studio. I just have the blank screen because I have no files open. The first set of videos will be on iOS, so I'll be doing iOS development and then Android development for each variable type. So we're just going to open, for now, viewcontroller.cs, and we'll open main.storyboard afterwards. Now variables are basically just a way of assigning a certain memory block. So although you don't necessarily need to know that specifically, just think of it in math, for example. If we're saying x, we don't want that. If we're just saying x equals 5, then that's just assigning the value of 5 to this variable x. Now there are several different types that we'll be looking at. In order, specifically, I'm going to put these in a comment. So these types are booleans, then we'll be looking at integers, then floats and doubles, and then we'll be looking at characters, and finally strings. Now these are the main, 6 types of variables we'll be looking at. These are just in this double dash or double slash here just means that these are in a comment, so the compiler ignores them. I'm just going to leave them up here for you. So there are 2 steps to what we call variable assignment. There is the declaration and then the initialization. So a declaration is just typing out the name and then giving it a type. So let's just say we have a variable. We're just going to call it variable. So all this is doing is assigning a name, and now we have to give it a type. So for example, we want a Boolean variable, it's bool. If we want an integer variable, it would be int. Floats and doubles, float, double, character, and string. Now notice each time I typed in the variable type, we had the word turn this kind of turquoise color. So that just indicates the type. So you can see that with these classes as well. This is kind of like a type of class. So this is just a type of variable. So it's a string type, or it's a Boolean type, whereas this is just the name. Now let's work with ints because I find they're the easiest to understand. This is just declaring a variable called variable, so that's the name of it, and it's of type integer. That's a declaration, and now this is an initialization. So let's give it the value 10. So this is just assigning a value to this variable. So that's what this equal sign is, just assigning the value. So we've created it, and we know it's of type int, so the memory knows to set aside a certain amount of room for it and to assign it only specific values. For example, integers could not take in Boolean values, it could not take in string values or character values, it can only take in non-decimal numbers, but we'll get more into that later. So each type, again, specific values that it can take in, and when I go through these videos, I'll explain what types each variable can take in. So variable assignment is important because we don't want to be using specific numbers or letters or strings or whatever each time. It's important to be able to store values in variables so we can call them and use them and modify them time and time again. So to recap, this is a variable initialization. We've declared the variable, given it a name and a type, and now this is giving it a value, and we can print that out if we really want. So let's just say this is label.text, and we'll give it this variable to string. I'll explain why we have to do that in later videos, but this is just assigning it a value, and if we were to do this, we were to go run with iPhone 5. Again, I'll get into all of this a little later as we go through each video and explain each specific type. But for now, I just want to be able to print something out just to show you an example of a variable assignment. One thing to note also is global versus local variables. So if we assign a variable at the top, it can be used throughout the entire code here, whereas if we assign a variable just within these curly braces, for example, it could only be used and recognized within that scope. So we get the 10 being printed out because we've assigned the value of this variable to be 10, and we're printing it out here. So that's the basic rundown of variables, and we'll get into more specifics when we discuss each type. In this part of the tutorial, we introduced the idea of variables. So we did that by explaining what the types are. So we had variables of type Boolean, integers, floats and doubles. We had characters and strings. So we talked about how to assign and declare them. So we gave them a type, a name, and we initialized them if we wanted to by giving them a specific value. The declaration involved no value, whereas initializing them actually involved giving them a specific value. So by now you should be able to list off a few types of variables and be able to declare and initialize one to be able to reassign or modify or print out or do whatever we want with.